Good morning, or afternoon as the case may be. I'm here to talk with you about medical devices and how they're regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. There are three things that you need to know basically about medical devices. One is what are they, how they're defined. The second is how FDA classifies them. And thirdly, how do you determine the risks associated with the medical devices and how do you mitigate those risks? But before going into those three items, I'd like to impress upon you the fact that medical devices have a life cycle and that FDA regulates the entire life cycle from its conception to the so-called death of the medical device and when it becomes its expiration date, whatever that may be, depending on the kind of medical device it is. And there are rules prior to your actually making the medical device in the design phase. There are rules when you are transferring those design ideas into the engineering drawings and into the manufacturing process. And there are rules with regard to the laboratory practices that you engage in. There are rules with regard to the clinical studies you may have to engage in. And there are rules at every point of the way. And as far as the design phase is concerned, it's important that you get it right at the beginning because you can't build a good design in later. And it's important in the laboratory portion of it that you follow good laboratory practices because once you've done the work, you obviously can't build in those good laboratory practices after the fact. You don't want to redo the work, so it's good to get it done right the first time. Now, what are medical devices? It may seem obvious at first, but the FDA it's a rule-driven organization constructed by our lovely Congress, so that you need to know it very particularly that it's a product that that has its action, which is not chemical, not biochemical, and that it is specifically an action that even if it's a chemical item itself, for example, a soap, that its primary action on the body is not to do any chemical interaction with the body. And in fact, there are medical devices that at first blush do not appear to be medical devices. For example, medical tests that test for, let's say, pregnancy. These products are medical devices regulated by the FDA because what they do is they take a fluid from the body, take a drop of that fluid onto a detector and determine whether or not the individual is pregnant or not. So there are many such devices that on first glance do not appear to be a medical device but are a medical device. The other thing that's very important in determining what is a medical device is the claims for the medical device. An ordinary product, even one that's already on the market, can be a medical device, a new medical device based on its claims, even though the product itself, the physical product, is no longer has not been changed. Let me give you an example, which is probably the easiest way to do it. Let's say there's an existing, let's take a real example. There is a device that's used in the process of doing Lasik, which you may know about, which is laser-assisted keratomileusis, which is essentially a product that is used to hold the eye tight and increase the pressure in the eye so that when a blade comes across the eye to make a cut, make a flap in the cornea so that the laser can then be used under the cornea layer to flatten the cornea. That device is a product that's been on the market for many years. So, and it's been used for cutting the cornea. But let's say you wanted to use that device for a new claim. Let's say you had the brilliant idea because of some research you've seen or some clinical evidence that this device would be good in treating certain kinds of glaucoma. And so you wanted to make this claim. Now you have a new medical device, so you have to go through all the rules of filing appropriate applications with the FDA to conduct a clinical trial, conduct those in accordance with the guidance that the agency has, and you need to get FDA approval for those clinical trials in this case. So even though the device may already be on the market, even though it's a simple device, it can be a completely new product, and it can be considered a product with a new classification. So let me go into the classifications. Basically, the classifications are of three sorts, and they're 1, 2, and 3, easily numbered. The first one is the low-risk products. These are products like tongue depressors, products that are really deemed by the agency to have very low risk profile. For example, think of another one that's not quite as silly as a tongue depressor, but there are many of them, such as a scalpel. And there are many different kinds of scalpels or surgical instruments. These are typically Class 1 products. And there are rules that apply to all products that are called general controls. The FDA wants control. It's all about control. Control of the product so that the product doesn't hurt anybody and that it's effective. So these controls are, general controls are, for example, that if you have a Class 1 device or any device that's regulated by the FDA, you have to register the facility where the product is made to make sure that the facility meets good manufacturing practices and quality system regulations. And you have to list those products that are made with the agency. It's a very minimal product, and then you have to follow, for the most case, with most products, good manufacturing products. There's some very simple products, perhaps like tongue depressors, that don't have to meet good quality control issues, but most do. And there are many thousands of different kinds of medical devices, so then there are the middle class of products that are have some risk associated with them and are called Class 2 products. They're moderate risk products. And there's a whole range of different products in this area. And typically these products have special controls. And those special controls can be guidance that the agency has specifically designed for that product that has very specific materials requirements, very specific laboratory requirements, very specific sterility requirements, very particular clinical data requirements, depending on the kind of product, and whether it's a product in the respiratory area, or whether it's a product in the heart area, or it's a neurological product. In each of these various products, there may be a number of subdivisions within those products, because there may be neurological products that are in the central nervous system. There may be those that are in the peripheral. And similarly with the circulatory system, there may be those circulatory products that are related to the heart. Some of them are stents for the periphery, and there are different clinical and other risk situations for those different products. So it has to be done by a product area issue. Both the safety and the effectiveness evaluations have to be done in a very particular fashion. So you can see quickly it gets fairly complicated as you get down into the minutiae of the kind of product that you're dealing with. So fundamentally, as the originator of your great idea for a new product, you really have to know what your product is supposed to do and what are the areas, how risky is it for the kind of disease you're trying to treat or trying to measure. And risk has to do not only with the apparent risk of the immediate physical product to the person. For example, a test product like a pregnancy test, what's the risk? The risk is not it's not done on the body itself. It's done on a solution from the body, and so the risk is one that has to do with the risk of detecting versus the risk of not detecting the pregnancy. And so you need receiver operator curves when you're dealing with tests of that sort, diagnostic tests. And there are other complexities in the diagnostic area that I couldn't possibly get into today, because there are some very arcane rules about when is a test really, and not a reagent for a test. So, and this is true in other areas as well. So it can get kind of complex as to whether you're a manufacturer of a component of a medical device, or whether you're a manufacturer of an accessory to a medical device. Because an accessory to a medical device could be a medical device itself, taking on the classification of the overall medical device. Let's take an example of that, that is a very real one. In the area of LASIK, which I know all too well since when I was at the agency, that's the area that I specialized in. LASIK, for correcting your vision, is a complex product. That is a product that involves a laser. It's a class 3 product, the highest risk product. Not only are there, it's more than special controls in the area of the highest class 3 products. You need to go through a more rigorous approval process by the agency that involves advisory panel input, long clinical trials. But getting back to the point about accessories, the Lasik device is a laser plus a keratome, that is a device to make a slice of the cornea. Already you have 2 separate products that are bundled in the same product. So you can see its complexity, let alone the complexity of the laser itself. And there are many different lasers that are scanning lasers, that are flying spot lasers, that have a lot of different kinds of characteristics. So you can imagine the risk analysis in these higher class products gets quite complicated. In addition, the keratome itself, it can be the old traditional keratome, which was basically a whizzing steel blade whizzing at 40,000 RPM, or it can be a much different kind of keratome, which is a water jet, which is a very fine jet of liquid, very small amount of liquid, but finely cuts the cornea. Or it could be another laser that is used to cut the cornea. So there are a lot of different kinds of products in the mix. And in addition, there are ancillary products that are used in the actual surgery, which, you know, you've got to keep the person's eye open, and the person can't sit there with their hand holding their eye open. So you need a spatula, not a spatula, I forgot what it's called. There's a little springy piece of steel that is used to hold the eye open. So there are a lot of ancillary products that are used in the process. And then afterwards, after the surgery, there are various drugs that are used to, dilate the pupil. Well, beforehand to dilate the pupil, and afterwards to make sure that you're not hurting when you come out of the local anesthetic. So as you see, these situations get very complex. And in some of the earlier LASIK devices, there were gases that were used because these are gas lasers. And so then there's an issue about whether or not the gas that's used in the laser is a medical device itself, or whether it's a component of it. In this case, it's a component. But there are rules about those gases, the safety of those gases. And there's a separate set of classifications having to do with the safety of the lasers. Because there are lasers that come in. You can have lasers that cut steel, but you can have lasers that, you obviously don't want that kind of laser to be used on your eye. You take your head off. So you need to classify the laser as well, and there are all sorts of interlocks and issues related to those lasers that those manufacturers have to deal with. Now so that the kind of application that you make to the agency depends on the classification of your product. If it's class 1, all you have to do is register and list. If it's a class 2 product, maybe all you have to do is register and list, but it depends on which class 2 product it is. Class 2 products can be hip implants, or they can be simpler products like an EEG machine, which is not all that simple, but there can be a variety of different kind of products. And the class 3 products like lasers or a heart pump or gee, there are many different kinds of products. Those have a much longer pre-market approval process that I mentioned before. And you have to demonstrate with very rigorous tests, both engineering tests and design tests, that the product is safe. And you typically have to go before a panel of experts outside the agency, or special FDA employees, to defend your product. It's sort of like a PhD thesis all over again, if you ever get one. And so it's pretty tense and very, very long and a very expensive process. Typically, a Class 1 product, the registration and listing is going to cost you maybe a couple $1,000s. Class 2 product is going to cost you at least $3,000 for the filing fee to the agency, plus maybe a $10,000, $15,000 for preparation of the application, which is called a pre-market notification. When you go to a Class 3 product, you need a pre-market application. Typically, well, the filing fee, I don't know what it is now, but it's probably around $10,000 to just file it with the agency. Preparation can be very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the preparation, depending on, again, the complexity of it. In addition to all of your costs for doing clinical trials and all the laboratory tests that you have to do, toxicity tests, biomaterials testing. So it is very a complex process. The more inventive your product, the more important your product, the more expensive it's going to be, probably. If it's an adaptation, a new adaptation of already a new kind of syringe with a different kind of lure lock that is safer or has features that are better for the clinician, you know, that probably it may be a Class 2 product, moderate risk product, but it's probably going to be very simple, because in a Class 2 product, all you have to do is demonstrate that the product is substantially equivalent to an existing product. So the kinds of products you're making are regulated according to their risks. So you should start off with doing a risk analysis of your product as part of your design to know what other kinds of products treat this condition or diagnose this condition that they're going to be competing for. If you're in such a novel situation that there are no such products, it's hard to do that these days, but it's maybe still possible if you can be that clever to develop a new product. Then you have a bigger challenge if you're dealing with a disease that is not been treated before and no one knows how to deal with it. The challenge is bigger. For example, if you're dealing with a product such as a replacement kidney, a bioengineered replacement kidney that involves both biomaterials and biological materials as well as man-made materials, then you have a complexity where you have to deal with a product that goes before 2 or 3 components of the regulatory agency, because the agency also has a part of the agency that regulates medical devices, biologics, and drugs. So, for example, if you have a stent that got a coating, a biological coating inside the stent to prevent restenosis, reblocking of the artery, then you're going to have to demonstrate that it's safe and effective both for its drug component and its medical device component. And so for complex products like a new liver, if you wanted to really wanted to develop a liver that did all the functions of our current liver, it's very a complicated kind of product. It's going to involve probably components that are drugs, biologics, and medical device, that is mechanical products, mechanical gizmos. So in that's a big challenge. I mean, it would be wonderful to have such a product, but maybe use it or grow one or get one from a pig. So I think that one of the things in ending this talk, I don't know how much time I have yet, but I think that one of the ways to consider where you go is to go back to the life cycle matter. That is, at each point in the process, your product is regulated by the agency, and you need to start off very well and when you're doing your planning. Keep meticulous laboratory files, follow the good laboratory practices, fold those files into a design file for the product so that when you're developing your different prototypes that you're keeping track of the changes you've made, so that when you get into that practice, then when you get to to the point where you need to make an application to the agency, you won't have to go back and recreate. Another thing, if your product involves a software component, either software or hardware components, you have a whole nother set of issues to deal with in terms of software validation and verification. And so, again, that's not something you can do after the fact. You need to do that as you're doing it. You need to develop those rules. An agency has guidance with regard to those issues. So if your product also involves those components, it has embedded chips or whatever, you need to deal with that as you're developing in the design process. And then there are a whole other set of rules of making sure the documentation is proper. And then after you finally have gotten FDA authorization for your product, you need to maintain records on that product. If it's a product that needs traceability, you need to keep traceability records. You need to have a complaint file. You need to keep those complaints on record because FDA may inspect your records. And they will look to see if there was a complaint about your product, how you dealt with that complaint. And did you have that complaint more than once, more than twice? If you go to the root cause, how did you get to the root cause of the problem? Or did you just ignore that, which is not a good thing? You need to close off those complaints in a very thoughtful manner. You need to have procedures that were developed beforehand to deal with those complaints, or modify those procedures as you get experience with the product and the kind of complaints that come in. Or the other issue is you're manufacturing the product according to your processes, and you find that there's some products that don't come out properly. What do? How do you take the materials and re-put them back into the manufacturing process, or do you now have a discard pile? So you need to figure out a way to quality control the product so that when they're actually sent to the patient or the doctors, when actually marketed, you have quality control over that product. So, do we have much time left? No, we're finished. Well, it's great talking with you, and I will enjoy meeting you sometime. I suggest that you go to Google and Google CDRH, and you can learn a great deal by just perusing their website. Bye-bye.